All right, welcome everybody to season 9 of the Multi-Battle Conference. I don't know how many of you guys were expecting power rankings this season, but here they are. I am joined today by Dan of the Nebby Backpackers. Dan, would you like to say hello? Introduce yourself to the league.
Hey guys, it's Dan, longtime coach here in NBC, and I know there's a couple of new players here. I am also involved in basically every draft league. I've probably played 40 Gen 9 draft leagues, so that's probably why Matt asked me to be involved in critiquing his rankings.
Indeed, yes. So Dan's got a lot of experience in Generation 8 and 9 draft, and is also a seasoned NBC player here. Which season did you win again in NBC here?
Season 7 and the Experimental League.
Ah, okay. Season 7 champion and the experimental league. Gotcha. Okay. So Dan knows what he's talking about here. So that's why I've got him here. All right. So we've ranked every team. We did not pay attention to the divisions here. We just ranked 1 to 20. And we did not pay attention to. We're not accounting for players here, player skill, anything like that. This is purely just how good is your team on paper. That's how we're judging the teams here. So, jumping right in, team number 20, the Potatoes. So, unfortunately, it seemed like Alyssa may have forgotten about her budget here, point budget here. Of course, a lot of points spent on that Giratina, 90 points for the U tier. Dan, how do you think this team, this draft played out? Do you think it was decent considering the point value mistake there?
So, 6 Pokemon have to come to every match instead of 4, so there are an obvious 5. The synergy there makes a little bit of sense, but they're really gonna have to time their deaths correctly so that the slow Pokemon can be out under the Trick Room that the Slowbro wants to set, where the fast Pokemon like the Giratina and the Qianpao can be out together and not under Trick Room. I think defensively their Type Core is fine. That's going to be a big difference though in Gen 9 compared to Gen 8 power rankings is Type Cores don't matter nearly as much when you can Terra 1/3 of the Pokemon any given match into a favorable defensive typing. Offensively, this team's definitely going to pack a decent-sized punch when it wants to, but overall, I think that they drafted a bit too narrowly, mostly because of the point total thing. One thing that I don't want people to underestimate is just how much damage Cranidos can do. That thing can really output some damage. So there's going to be at least 1 week where that thing comes with like a choice scarf or a choice band and just starts ruining someone. But overall, I don't think that this is the strongest team, mostly because of the points and how they were used.
Definitely, yeah. I think I forgot who it was. Somebody in the server pointed out that Cranidos has the highest base attack on the whole team. So that's competing with 120 from Qianpao and Giratina. So that was kind of funny. I think they got some decent value out of the E tiers too. The E tiers are supposed to be Pokemon that are completely useless and have basically nothing to do. I think they found a few Pokemon that well, you could do something with. So that was pretty good, at least. But yeah, I think prep is going to be pretty easy for opponents here, considering you know pretty much what's coming virtually every time.
Yeah, like the Giratina and Qianpao have to come every time, and on opposite sides of the field as well. So the Giratina's lackluster attack stat can take advantage of the Sword of Ruin. One thing that I found was interesting was that Giratina was the selection here for the restricted. I thought Giratina was one of the worst restricteds available, and I know that it was close to being banned for some reason, but do you have an idea on either why it was close to being banned or if I'm missing something as to it's actually much better than I think it is?
I don't know exactly, but it felt to me like maybe more of a personal gripe slash joke from whichever player nominated it. Yeah, I don't really see why it should be banned either. I think that even with Qianpao and Volcarona already, there are probably some other restricted you could pick, U-tiers you could pick in round 3 that would have been better. I also don't really like the Origin form very much because it reduces your flexibility since you have to have that Griseous Orb on there. So yeah, I'm not really sure about that either.
Alright, well I think that wraps up my thoughts on this team pretty well. Volcarona is going to have to pull a lot of weight as the only special attacker.
Indeed, yes. Very true. Okay, moving on. Number 19. Nose Mole Reap, is that how we're pronouncing that, I guess?
Sure, yeah.
Sure, why not? Okay, so...
No. Mole is from Smallwood, so it's Nose Mole Reap.
Nose Mole Reap. Okay, alright. So Nose Mole Reap, here we go. This one I thought was actually surprisingly well balanced for a U-tier comp. At least point-wise. I think they got some decent value out of their C tiers as well, which is contributing to that more balanced feel. I think this is the first time we've ever had like Rotom Mo down in C tier instead of B. So there's an example, some value there. Pipe synergy I think was clearly prioritized with this team. It's definitely lacking in support, which is going to be putting a lot of pressure on Ogerpon to be a redirector rather than a more offensive piece, which it wants to be, I think, more frequently, especially with that Hearthflame form. I think it's kind of it's a little bit lacking in speed control as well. Slower Trick Room modes they might have a little bit of trouble with, but Dialga is at least defensive enough that hey, maybe if you're in a bit of a pickle Trick Room wise, you can reverse it perhaps, but that also forces you to kind of take up a move slot on Dialga when maybe you might not want to do that otherwise. Diancie can help with that too, especially if you Terra out of that god-awful defensive typing. What do you think, Dan?
So I think it's a pretty strong team overall. I would have liked this team a lot more last generation than this generation because the defensive cores don't matter nearly as much to me when I'm evaluating teams this generation. I do think that the Rotom is going to have to put in a lot of work with the more supportive sets as opposed to an offensive or setup sets most week. I'm foreseeing a lot of Will-O-Wisp sets, maybe even some of the Pain Splitty type sets, that kind of stuff. Tauros is a very solid addition to this team. It's one that always pulls more than its weight. But overall, this is something that I'm going to say about a lot of teams is I don't think this team has a lot of punch. It has one Pokemon with an attack stat that's above 120. I mean, you can count two because Ogerpon, if it Terras, obviously gets the attack boost to it too. But with how bulky some of the teams are this season, this team's not going to be picking up a lot of 1 or 2 hit knockouts. They're going to need to find a way to sustain damage, and I don't know if this team is bulky enough for the lack of damage that it's going to be outputting for a good portion of matches.
Yeah, I can see that being an issue. I think if you this team feels like a team that if you build it right, if you play it right, if you have the right Terra types, I think it can be bulky enough for that, but it does risk potentially not being bulky enough, so I definitely see that. The last thing I'll say here is I'm gonna I want to get this out of the way a little bit early. I'm gonna stick up for type cores here a little bit, even though I realize we are in Gen 9, we have Terra. You can a larger percentage of your team is going to be Terra'd in 6v6 multi-battles compared to VGC. But I will say that if you have those type cores locked down, it doesn't force you to use your Terra to make up for those holes as much. It makes it gives you a little bit more freedom to allow your team to do what it wants to do rather than like, oh shit, I don't have a grass type, for example. Not, of course, this team has 2, but you know, if a team doesn't have a grass type, maybe they're forced to use their Terra to plug up those holes. If you have a decent grass type, then you don't necessarily always have to do that. So I think having those type cores, even though we're in Terra land, is still strong, especially for draft where versatility and flexibility are so important.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you would come at it from that direction. And to some extent, I agree. But it being closed Terra instead of open Terra makes it, I think, even less important because your opponents don't know what defensive type you can be at any point in time.
Definitely.
One other thing I will add on this team is the speed control is very questionable to me. So this team feels like it's going to be going second a lot of the time because Scyther is the Tailwind setter.
Yeah.
And that means if you want Tailwind up, you need to be playing Scyther consistently as a, what is that, a C tier?
Yeah.
And the Trick Room setters, Dialga mostly, maybe Diancie gets Trick Room, right?
Yes.
So then you can get one of them out to set Trick Room if you want. But, you know, I feel like if the opponent gets out Tailwind against you, unless you actively are going for your Trick Room mode, you're just going to be outsped on this team so much of the time.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen pretty frequently. Maybe a Scarf, Icy Wind, Miss Magius. I don't know. There's some other options here, but they're not ideal. Ready to move on?
Sure.
All right, number 18. We've got the Batty Bads. Stan, what do you think about the Batty Bads team?
So, I'm not entirely sure what the overall game plan is on this team. Again, looking at offenses, there is Landorus Incarnate and Sariledge, and then Greninja is the next best offensive threat after that, and with the nerf to Protean / Libero this generation, that's not super strong. So I am worried about the throughput on this team. Now, obviously, it's got a lot of bulk. It's got a great redirector and Electabuzz, even if I think that was picked a bit early.
Yeah.
Illumise is very divisive. It can obviously do Tailwind and Encore shenanigans, but it doesn't really have a lot of board presence in terms of, okay, you have speed control, but you still have an Illumise on the field. You gotta waste a turn getting it out to have something that's gonna take advantage of it, or you just have one Pokemon that's taking advantage of it. So, overall, and I think is Malamar the only Trick Room setter here? I
believe so.
And the lowest speed on this team is 50 with Regice. And then if their anti-Trick Room mode is Regice, Swalot, and maybe you can count Scrafty on that. So this team is going to be easy to take advantage of with Trick Room, and it also is going to be trickier for this team to set Tailwind and take advantage of it than it would like to with the Illumise. Now defensively, obviously there are some pretty strong, pretty bulky Pokemon here, but I'm not quite sure what the week-to-week game plan is going to be. Yeah, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It gives them a lot of flexibility in prep, and their opponents can't prep for specific stuff. But I generally like teams that you can see like 2 or 3 like, oh, yeah, this is what it wants to do, and it's got some iterations off of that, as opposed to, I have no idea what this team wants to do. Like, Dockspun, but without anything obvious to trigger its ability. I don't know. There's just a whole bunch of things that I think are cool pieces, but I don't really see how they fit together. I guess the Sariledge can trigger the Dockspun.
Yeah, that last thing you said, a lot of good pieces, not sure how they fit together, is literally exactly what I was about to say. I agree with that very strongly, because you got, like, I'm always a big proponent of, like, strong support pieces that will do one thing extremely well, like Electabuzz and Illumise, so, like, you know, great picks there. I like that Illumise can sort of enable some immediate offense from Sariledge and especially from Landorus. But other than that, it's like not always super obvious how it's going to be helping. It does have a pretty decent toolkit outside of the priority Tailwind that will help. Fake Tears next to a special Landorus would be cool, or next to a Greninja, I guess. Electabuzz feels like it's a little bit wasted. Like, it feels like if you had a decent Trick Room sweeper, you could use Electabuzz, Malamar for some kind of Trick Room mode. Even, you know, if you have Scrafty, you might not even need Electabuzz, or vice versa. Electabuzz is I wish there were more setup options here. You got like bulk up Scarlet, and some Trick Room without a Trick Room sweeper. So like Electabuzz is kind of being used well here, but I could see it being used quite a bit better. So it is weird. I'm very much I agree with you a lot. I like a lot of the pieces. Not exactly sure how they're going to fit together, even though I can envision some scenarios where some combinations on this team are going to work.
Yeah, and so one thing about this team is it had two A tiers, one S tier, no U tiers, and a pretty balanced core besides that. But the primary pieces weren't taken until the last 3 picks of the draft, so they couldn't be built around because there was no idea what was going to be there.
Yeah, that was very interesting.
I'm a big proponent of taking 1 or 2 value pieces in low tiers if something's obviously wrong. But if you don't know what your low tiers are going to be supporting as the high tiers, it's tough to make all of your low tiers make sense.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And I think you can sort of see the result of that. Some of these C tiers are, like, they've got some question marks, at least for me. I think maybe, usually I like to see teams that are a little bit more well-balanced, but, like, I'm not sure if the balance was worth it here. I think some of those C tiers, you could smush those points together and get, like, one big thing in A or B. That might be better than like the combination of a Swalot and a Dockspun and a Regice or something like that, you know. So
yeah. Also, no one on this team can use Batty Bad, and Nintendo has copyright struck their logo, so 0 out of 10.
Yikes. All right, number 17, Dirty 30s Squad. All right, so this one's kind of interesting. My first thought 7.8 out of 10. Too much water. My second thought is some of these kind of related to the too much water thing. Some of these cores are like interesting, but they leave a little bit to be desired. I think like. I like the idea behind this Chien-Pao Rain Basculegion thing, but I think Chien-Pao also wants the option to have something else out next to it that's going to provide immediate offense, not just like, well, I got to set up the Rain first and maybe let something die and then Basculegion strong. Like maybe something like a Dragapult next to it would be cool. Just something fast, physical that can just do damage now. That would make the Chien-Pao a lot better on this team. The starter core down here is like kind of interesting. I like the bulkiness of it, but then Typhlosion doesn't necessarily fit. Not that Typhlosion's a bad pick, but it's makes the core a little bit awkward. Not really sure what Electabuzz is helping with here. We just saw Electabuzz on the last team. I think it was situated a little bit better there. I'm not seeing quite as many like setup options here, or like a big offensive piece that just needs to like sit there, do damage while the redirector helps it out. Like there's not quite as much of that here. Similarly to the last team, I think Electabuzz plus Carbink could be a good Trick Room combo if you had a decent Trick Room sweeper, but I'm not really seeing one here unless you want to set up Iron Defense, Body Press stuff on Chestnut, maybe. But I don't know how good that's going to be as a Trick Room sweeper to like take down a good chunk of a whole team. But Dan, what do you think?
Couple things here. One, Typhlosion is really good next to Tailwind because of Eruption.
Yeah.
The only problem here is their Tailwind sets Rain. So there's so much anti-synergy with that that I'm not really sure what the Typhlosion is going to want to do, because without being able to threaten that big Eruption, I'm not sure if it's worth the 30 points. Two, this is just a note, I am under the impression, based on my research into it, that Basculegion is considerably worse in multi-battles than in VGC because of how the move Last Respects works. It does not count your teammates' fainted Pokemon, so it's not capped at base 200 power, it's capped at base 150, and if the opposing team knocks out the stuff opposite the Basculegion, the Basculegion does not get stronger with the last respects. So that's just something to keep in mind with it.
Right.
Now, I love Chestnut on the Rain. The Electabuzz, yeah, I guess if you feel like you need a redirector, it's fine, but I'm not exactly sure what it's doing. Overall, like, obviously this team has a pretty powerful punch. Like, Basculegion in the Rain, even though it's weaker, and Shanpao, they're going to hit hard. But I just think there are some pieces on this team that don't make sense together. And if I'm counting right, there's like 2 Pokemon that resist Thunderbolt. And that makes me nervous for a team like this, especially when you'll see a couple different teams have solid Disquake modes coming up. And Disquake into the team where the only Pokemon that isn't hit super effectively by one of them is Chestnut makes me a bit nervous.
Yeah, I was about to say, the electric weaknesses. Maybe that's what Electabuzz is for, but yeah, if you're dealing with Disquake, that's not going to help you.
Yeah. Oh, I guess Chien-Pao isn't hit super effectively by either, but it's dead anyway.
Oh, yes. Yeah, indeed. Okay, number 16. We have the Platinum Pixies. Dan, would you like to start us off here?
Yeah, so this is an interesting team because Kyurem is really, really strong, even in its base form, and it's only 60 points, not 90. That's a lot of stats plus the move Glaciate, and I think it can be pretty valuable because you can tear it out of its horrible defensive typing. I also really like Gouging Fire, both as a setup sweeper, just a bulky attacker, and also a support option. So I think those are both good options. I do think the Indeedee are really sure that it's as useful for the Kyurem. But once we get past those first 3, like, I think those work really well together and it's a pretty strong and threatening team. It just feels a little bit disjointed at that point. Like, there's an emphasis on sand with 3 ground types, 2 of them having abilities that let them set sand, and a sand sweeper with Houndstone. I think Houndstone is great, but I'm not sure if that's something you want to have so much relying on. It's got a Trick Room setter, but the Trick Room sweepers are questionable. Like, Sandaconda maybe can function in that role. Slowking, I guess you could set and sweep with it. But overall, after the top 3 on this team, it just starts to feel disjointed. Like, it feels like the top 3 are one team, the bottom 7 are another considerable team, and I don't know quite how they fit together.
Definitely, yeah. You hit a lot of the points I was thinking about too. I'm definitely very skeptical of this sand mode. Not to say that it can't succeed, but I suspect that most weeks it won't. Shiftery, I'm not really sure what it's doing here. Maybe they were just figuring, we're lacking Fake Out and Tailwind. Fuck it. The double dragon up top, I'm a little skeptical of. I realize they're not sharing a lot of weaknesses because of their secondary types. But I think a little bit more diversity up there is going to be a little bit stronger, especially if you're dumping so many points into 3 S tiers. The Trick Room mode, I agree, sort of lackluster without an extra sweeper. Like, Expanding Force spam with Slowking is going to be strong, but I think you probably want something else to help deal with, Dark and Steel types. If you had like a Scrafty or something, or Iron Hands obviously is expensive, but something like that. And I'm not convinced that Indeedee is being used to its fullest potential as well. Obviously, it's there for Trick Room. It's there for Follow Me next to Slowking. It's there for Follow Me next to these 2 big Dragon Dancers. But that seems like kind of it. I think, unless there's something else I'm not seeing. Iron Defense Anaconda, maybe. I don't know. Whatever. Feels like there's more stuff you could do with Indeedee. Like, at least throw a fast Psychic type on here. Give me just one like mid-level strength expanding force spammer that's not just slow kick, that might be nice. So there's some things this team is missing, some things I think it's not doing as well as it could, but it has some really interesting pieces that I'm looking forward to seeing. I always like seeing base Kyurem. I feel like we don't get enough Dragon Dance gouging fire normally, so there's some. I'd like to see the Houndstone mode succeed. That would be fun. So we'll see. I'm hopeful for this team. I want it to succeed. But it is rank 16. Any final thoughts, Dan?
Houndstone is such a good Pokemon. Yeah, Houndstone is such a good Pokemon. Generally speaking, next to Tyranitar. But again, it's weaker with the way that Last Respect works. I think if either Kyurem or Gouging Fire, doesn't really matter which one, was Iron Valiant instead, I would like this team so much more. Because then you've got a fast Pokemon that has access to Expanding Force. You've got better offensive type coverage as well, and the team doesn't just fold to a Tyranitar.
Definitely, yeah. I think that would be a very cool pick. Mm-hmm. All right, moving on. Number 15. We've got 3 Turn Sleep. This one is interesting because, at first glance, I thought, "Ooh, man, look at this, very strong." And then as I started looking at it more, I was like, "Well, maybe not as strong as it seems to be on the surface." It looks strong at first because the team seems pretty. It's well defined. It doesn't have this problem of, "Oh, I don't know how these pieces fit together." It's obvious how these pieces fit together, especially the top 4, big-ass rain mode, right? Here's a problem, though. And there's going to be a problem with a few of these teams down in the bottom half. Very strong mode. Nothing wrong with Rain with our Chaladon, Tornadus, all that good stuff. In draft, it's not usually as good of an idea to go all in on one mode, especially that relies on a field effect, like Rain, because your opponents each week are going to be prepping specifically for that. So you're going to have to deal with anti-Rain tech basically every week as long as you're playing somebody with half a brain. So that's gonna mean your team crumbles if that anti-Rain tech from your opponents works. I definitely had a lot of Trick Room related gripes with a lot of teams. Not the case here. I think I would like to see maybe more support for Gothorita trying to set up Trick Room. But my main gripe about the Trick Room stuff here is that you have 3 different slow physical attackers. I'm not really sure why you need all of Conkeldurr, Caparajah, and Torterra. None of those are bad picks on their own, but altogether, you're kind of wasting points on Pokemon doing the same thing. So maybe those points could have been better used to get something to support Gothorita instead. So those are my main thoughts here. Strong modes, especially the Rain, but in draft it's easily exploitable, more so than in regular VGC. Dan?
Yeah, the Chaladon is obviously really strong. Tornadus as a secondary Rain setter will give it some more consistency because of the priority.
Yeah.
I do think this team can be exploited a bit by Trick Room when they are going for their Rain mode, because it's pretty obvious when they're going for their Rain mode. Then if you set Trick Room while Rain is up, it becomes a bit trickier for them. Obviously, Conkeldurr and Caparajah are a little bit redundant. I think they're both obviously really good in that role. Torterra, actually, I like more than either of them on this team because it functions as a pretty effective... one, it can be an endgame walk with a Leech Seed set, and 2, you can Terra Ground Earthquake with it next to Tornadus, and it is actually a pretty effective under Tailwind Earthquake user, because at base 56 speed, it can outspeed Dragapult under Tailwind, which is, you add Choice Band, you go Terra Ground Earthquake, and suddenly you've got a really powerful early game mode on it.
Speaking of doubling its speed, sorry to cut you off there. Torterra does have Shell Smash as well, so I could see a Shell Smash set being used in conjunction with the Rain mode. If you're positioning well, maybe you have a setup Torterra with the Kingdra and Rain, and they're going to have that Torterra is going to have much easier time bopping those opposing water types. So there could be some synergy there. I could see that.
Yeah, there are definitely ways that this team can work together, but like you said, if it's going for the Rain mode, it's just gonna have to fight so hard to keep Rain up consistently.
Yeah.
And then I like that it has a Perish Trap endgame possible, but that's gonna be really tough to pull off in this league.
Definitely, yeah, and especially because like oftentimes what you want to do is kill the 3 Pokemon on one side first, which makes Perish Trap a little bit less effective. Because if you bop 2 of your opponent's Pokemon in VGC and they can't switch anymore, and then you force both of the last ones out on the field, that's a lot more effective. But as an end game plan, when maybe there's only 1 Pokemon on the opposing side at a time, you're probably better off just going for like classic Vulcan offense to finish that off.
Yep, generally I agree, but I think it covers everything I had on this team.
All right. Number 14 then. We got the Mega Skankus Cons. Let's see. Dan, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, so okay. Incineroar is a trap in Draft League. This is
especially in multi-battles.
Yeah, it is not nearly as good because one, the repositioning, you don't have access to half your team to switch in on a parting shot, and the support it provides is not nearly as important in a multi-battle. So Incineroar, Mienshao, Moltres, Blissey, Tinkaton, Iron Crown, Swampert, Electros, Meganium Lantern. Obviously powerful stuff going on here. But I'll tell you this, if that Incineroar was an Indeedee female, this is a top 5 team for me. But the fact that it's Incineroar and not Indeedee female makes it much worse. Indeedee female would make it so Iron Crown had Expanding Force, Moltres had a great redirector for it, and it would have a very powerful Psychic fighting Dark Core. But with the Incineroar on this team, one, you've spent most of your points on Dark types.
Yeah.
Which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing, because Psy Spam is all over the place in this league. But I don't know. This team just doesn't have a lot of punch without setting up. In fact, Mienshao and Iron Crown are the only Pokemon above 115 in any offensive stats without a setup move. Now, Moltres can obviously set up, but you want a redirector there. And that's, again, where I think this team needs a redirector or something else to help to support it. Because you've got... I mean, you can cycle Fake Out with Tinkaton, Mienshao, and Incineroar, but I don't know. This team feels like a lot of pieces that are strong, and also Incineroar, which I will say is overpriced in multi-battles. And I just think it needs another glue piece to keep it together, because I don't think that it quite works cohesively together. Now, the low tiers, Swampert I think is fine. Electros, I think, it has no weakness. Fine. Blissey, I'm not exactly sure what it's doing. I'm actually really curious to see what happens with the Blissey on a week-to-week basis. But overall, I think the through line of this team, like what it wants to do, has some question marks, even though it obviously has some powerful picks.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. The Blissey in round 4 I thought was a really interesting pick. Like, I'm curious about why they prioritized it so highly. I hadn't thought about the addition of Indeedee onto this team, but yeah, that would fix a lot of stuff. I also think that speed control is kind of lacking here, and it puts a lot of burden on Moltres to be the Tailwind setter when it's not super good at that anyway. At base 90, you typically want something faster. And Moltres also wants to be doing other things. If you have to use that for your speed control, that's costing you a move slot that you might want to use for Nasty Plot. That's more time Moltres is on the field taking hits when it could be setting up for damage output. You definitely want to be supporting the Moltres instead of forcing it into that support role. Let's see. The low tiers I think are fine. I kind of like that it looks like they just spent some points on those on like okay looking low tiers that just help fill out some extra types. I think that's fine. Let's see. I guess that's about all I have.
So many times.
What's that?
Yeah, I draft Lantern so many times and never ever bring it to a match. Like maybe once. It's been on like 5 or 6 teams of mine because I'm like, oh, so cool. Volt Absorb, Water Absorb. Yeah, this is gonna be great on this team. And I can just never justify bringing it.
Yeah, the stats are just so god awful. Yeah. All right. Any final thoughts on this team, or are we moving on?
No, I think we can move on. I don't know if this division has NDDF available, but if they drop Incinor for NDDF, then this becomes one of my favorite teams.
I believe both NDDs were picked.
Might be.
Yeah. All right, number 13, we have the Foxy Mouse Pads. I found this team to be very interesting. This team felt kind of like 3-turn sleep to me because the mode, the main mode, is very clear and very, very strong. But it's got the same problem. I think that if your psychic terrain is nullified somehow, some of this team is going to fall apart. Now, not all of it. I will say this team is less reliant on psychic terrain than 3-turn sleep is reliant on rain. But it's still a big component here that your opponents are going to be prepping hard against every single week. Now, given that this Psy-Spam mode is what you're going for, I do like how it's constructed. I think the Sinistra is very cool. I would like to see Follow Me here as well, because then you're basically telling your opponents, hey, you can just use Terra Grass or Safety Goggles to get around all redirection this week. I also think that the inclusion of fighting dark and fire here is really nice with a Psy-Spam mode to deal with opposing dark and steel types. You might have gone a little bit overboard on the fighting types. Spent a whole got a big S tier and an A tier, both fighting types, although they do both work with the mode. Let's see. Scizor seems decent here. Bug helping with opposing dark types, and then Steel just to add some defensiveness to your team is nice, but Bullet Punch is awkward with Psychic Terrain. And Speed Control is definitely really lacking here, aside from Trick Room. So that's what I got. Dan, what do you think?
Okay, if this was a no-Terra team, I love this team. So, full disclosure, I have run an Urshifu in DD Delphox team before, and Delphox ended up the kill leader on that team by a very large margin. Delphox is so good with access to Expanding Force and Heat Wave to hit steel types. Like, it is one of the best psychic terrain attackers. I also really like the Sinistra. Again, the big thing that held this team back for me, and I probably like it a bit more than you, the biggest thing that held this team back for me is that it doesn't have great speed control. If this team, I don't know what the move would be, but had Drift Blim on it, like put Drift Blim on this team, and suddenly this team is awesome. Because if you get that Unburden Tailwind action going with some of the other support moves that it has, it supports the whole team just so incredibly well that I think it becomes very scary at that point. So if this team finds, any kind of consistent tailwind, I just think slot so well onto it that if they were able to do that, again, not to tell other people what to do, but just to give generalized advice from what that would bump this team really close to the top echelon for me.
Definitely, yeah. Speed control is definitely a big deal here. You could even, I don't know which division this was in, but somebody picked Drifloon. If you're in the other division, you could pick that up for a budget pick. I love Drifloon, especially with Psychic Terrain. Any other thoughts here, Dan?
Nope, I think that basically wrapped it up on this one.
All right, number 12. We've got the mediocre Mudkips. Do you want to start us here, Dan?
Yeah, so this team has a steel type restricted, a kilowatt roll based discharge mode, and Impolon, which is a weird theme that we might see again in the future. But it's a very solid team. I love kilowatt roll and Garchomp together as a discharge mode. That is incredibly powerful. Ambipom does so much damage with Technician. Base 100 does not feel accurate with the output that thing can do, like Terra Ice triple axle, and then you're one-shotting basically anything that's weak to ice. It hits so hard. And then, Clefairy as a redirector is fine in multi-battles, especially if you want to put it next to Dialga, for example, to get going with it. Dialga, again, I'm not in love with as a restricted, but it's big, bulky, and can hit hard, so I guess there's nothing really too much to complain about it. And then the Paldean Tauros, the fire type, I do think is very solid on this team as well. And Shannon needed the Garchomp since she is a ground type trainer. But overall, I do think that this is a powerful, well put together team. It's just maybe there's another team that's very similar to that we happen to like more.
Maybe there is, and maybe there isn't. So this team, like it looks solid with what they have. I think the top-heavy nature of this team was not worth it. There's some holes I think that could be filled by maybe not having a U tier comp, or maybe not taking 2 A tiers with the U tier. I don't know how you want to mix it up, but I think lacking a strong grass type is unfortunate. It's gonna, like I mentioned earlier, it's gonna force you to use your Terra to get that grass typing onto your team, unless you want to use Turtwig, which is not a real Pokemon. You can Trick Room is probably fine most weeks. I can see Dialga and Clefairy deterring and or beating most Trick Room modes, but you might have trouble with some. Let's see. I think it's a fairly solid team with like good modes. Obviously, the Disquake mode, that's going to be strong. Dialga with Telepathy gives you something extra to Earthquake next to. The Mudkips here with Milotic is going to be annoying. Anybody who played against them back in Gen 8 might remember how irritating and dominant their Coil Hypnosis Milotic was. I think this team is just a little bit too predictable given how top-heavy it is and how not extremely versatile some of these Pokemon are. Clefairy, you basically know what that thing's gonna do. Milotic, I hope they break more out of the Coil Hypnosis mold and use some other modes with that thing, because there is more stuff you can do with it that would be worth using here. Garchomp is mostly a straightforward physical attacker. Dialga has some more versatility. Kilowattrel, mostly just going to be attacking and setting Tailwind. It's too predictable, I think. And I think part of that is due to Pokemon choice, part of that is because it's top-heavy. So you have a lot of good and a lot of bad with this team, I think. Any final thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, that seems fair. The 6 Pokemon they bring any given match are going to be very strong.
Yeah.
But they will also be pretty easy to prep for, I think, is where I'm falling on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Moving on to number 11, we've got Avocado Allergy. Okay, this team, I like the top end of this team, especially the Riolu, because this looks like, all right, we're going to pick some super solid Pokemon with not a lot of counterplay, good Physical attackers, we've got something that crits all the time and something that crits sometimes. Fuck it, put prankster coaching next to it. That looks fun and strong. You've also got, the sturdy ogre pawn is just super consistent. You're going to be able to redirect for the benefit of a lot of different Pokemon here. Maybe just redirecting to set up an Iron Defense or a Trick Room. Maybe you're redirecting to let Urshifu do damage or let Latias set up Tailwind or something like that. And then even if Ogerpon's still on the field afterward, you can do some good damage there. Let's see, what else do I got here? I like the type core, the Firewater Grass core here. The Chandelure makes it a little bit more flimsy, but I do like the combination of Urshifu and the Cornerstone Ogerpon here. Let's see, solid Tailwind, but I'd like to see maybe a little bit more variety in speed control and or maybe a faster Tailwind setter. It also kind of looks like some of these low-tier picks, I'm not sure how strong they are. I think maybe you could have pooled some of those points to at least get one solid Pokemon to help shore up the Trick Room matchup a little bit more. Although I do think there are going to be some circumstances where Herod Bastiodon can just bulk its way through opposing Trick Room modes and just sit there and not die. So either way, whether this team succeeds or not, I'm going to be very curious to see how all this plays out. Dan?
Yeah, this is a fun team where the top three are very synergistic with one another again. And then I also like the Vivillon and Latios, how they fit with that. The Bastiodon, Chandelure, Skuntank, Donphan, and Zebstrika, I'm a bit more confused about what their role is going to be on the team. It's not to say that they won't have a good one, but I don't see how clearly they fit into everything. I guess the Donphan next to, the Vivillon or the Latios, you got Earthquake as an option there, or it has Ice Shard for some reason if you need a priority move. But overall, the team knows what it's doing. It is very strong. It will hit very hard and very fast, but the speed control is a big question mark for me. Latios is not the most consistent Tailwind setter in the world. It's solid at it, but there are faster Tailwind setters. And then if Trick Room gets set against this team, they need to somehow get the Bastiodon on the field, or the Skuntank, I guess, to survive. And that makes me pretty nervous, because this team is very frail. They hit hard. If they get speed control, they're going to win a lot of games, but if they are behind the 8-ball in the speed control, a lot of their Pokemon are going to die really fast.
Yeah, I think if maybe they had a Pokemon that had access to Trick Room that was a little bit bulkier than something like Chandelure, is that the only Trick Room user on this team? It appears so.
I don't know. Does Latios get Trick Room?
Oh, it might. Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm not sure if I want to count that.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you had something that was bulkier, maybe better defensive typing, you could at least plop it on the field and try to reverse Trick Room, just survive a turn, but sometimes it's going to be hard for Chandelure to do. Yeah, I think that about covers it for me. Any other last thoughts on this one, Dan?
Nope, that's all for me.
All right, number 10. We've got the Shrootle Bombs. Here's our first Zacian team comp. This one is the other Zacian that we're gonna get to in a little bit made that team comp made a lot more sense to me. This one is strong in that it's got good pieces up at the top. They're gonna work together. I think Impolon is maybe a little bit underrated. I love, the competitive that it has now is super cool. Defensive typing is really good. So I'm hoping that it's not too lackluster for this Fairy Dragon Steel core up top. Although I am a little bit more skeptical of the fantasy core in multi-battles, especially because to me it feels like mostly a defensive core, and it's harder to get that to work in multi-battles since you can't switch Pokemon between the two sides. Um, so definitely looks strong defensively with good typings. Looks capable of a lot of bulky offense with some speed, although once again I think speed control is lacking here. Some of these mid-range speed Pokemon like Raging Bolt, Impolon, Sinistra really desperately want Tailwind. And the only real speed control here I'm seeing is like Trick Room, Sinistra, Icy Wind, Empoleon, Electro Web, Raging Bolt, which are good, but you're gonna want something with more of a punch than that. I think setting up that Tailwind so that those that Raging Bolt with that awkward 75 speed stat can just immediately outspeed those fast things instead of relying on like a double Electro Web. Let's see. Trick Room looks a little bit awkward if you've got slower stuff on the other team. But at the same time, it feels a little bit like maybe because of the top-heavy nature of the team, maybe you couldn't really afford to address the Trick Room matchup more than they did. So, what do you think, Dan?
So two things. Empoleon doesn't need to be there for there to be a fantasy core. Zacian and Raging Bolt is its own fantasy core, which is cool.
Well, it's not a steel type, though.
Zacian? Oh, is this not the sword version?
No, it's pure fairy.
Oh, okay. Hero. Okay, never mind. Okay. So, have you ever played with Raging Bolt before?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. Raging Bolt doesn't care if it goes first. It survives every hit, and it's got
Thunderclap too. You do have Thunderclap, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so it is probably the least concerned Pokemon in the 70 to 80 speed range about speed control.
Fair enough.
But yes, this team, if it had speed control, I would rate it much better. If it was deeper, I would rate it much better. But Sinistra, Raging Bolt, and Zacian, I think, are all incredibly strong offensively, and I think they've got good offensive coverage to pressure things that the other doesn't handle. The only thing about this team that concerns me a bit is if there is some sort of bulky fire type on the other side, there's not a great way to hit it except for like Terra Ground, Zacian, Terra Blast, or Empoleon, I guess. But the Raging Bolt, I think, patches up a lot of the concerns with both Trick Room and Tailwind. Not all of them, obviously, because it's not always going to be on the field. But if it's always threatening a priority Thunderclap, I learned this calc at Atlanta when I was playing Raging Bolt. In the sun, next to Chi-Yu, a Terra Electric Raging Bolt one-shots a Shadow Rider.
Oh, that's fun. Okay.
So it deals so much damage so if Trick Room is set against this team, the Raging Bolt can sort of pin the big Trick Room attacker if you've dealt damage to it previously, or if you're Terra Electric, you might just be threatening to one-shot if it's not that bulky. So I think Raging Bolt is, I know Zekrom costs 90 points, Raging Bolt is just better Zekrom for cheaper. And I think that it really pulls this team together, which is why I like it a bit more than you do. But again, this team definitely wants speed control, because if that Raging Bolt isn't on the field, it's not the bulkiest team in the world, and it's going to be outsped a lot of the time because there's no real way for it to be faster or slower than the other teams.
Definitely, yeah. Fair enough on the Raging Bolt point. That's why I have you here. You're a lot more well versed in Gen 9 than I am. So I appreciate you bringing up that point. So any other thoughts, or are we moving on to number 9?
Nope. I think that basically wraps it up for me on this. Obviously, Zacian's really strong and really fit.
Yes.
Really curious to see how it does.
Indeed. All right. Number 9. Oh, look at that. Another Zacian team at number 9. Dan, do you want to start us off with this one?
Yeah, so first of all, this team is a bunch of filthy liars. They're called the Anti-Spam Society. They have an Iron Crown. Um, they do have the Drifloon on this team, which I do love on the Psy Spam move, especially because Indeedee Female does not get Expanding Force this generation. Zacian, I think, goes really well into attacking the things that Indeedee and Iron Crown can't break. Specifically, it threatens Dark types. Although a defensive Steel type against this team looks really good, which is probably the main reason I would have. Is it does not really have great tools to deal with bulky Steel types, like Chestnut and Camerupt are fine. And they do provide you with a Trick Room mode, and I do like Yanmega as a. But a bulky Steel type against this team, if you are not sits there. I mean, I guess Zacian can hit it with a type move, but I don't know, that feels less consistent than a lot of the other team's tools to deal with Steel types, and that's the main drawback of this team, even though it has one of the most powerful modes and game plans and a good way to set Tailwind, and then a decent Trick Room setter as well as in Indeedee, although I would have loved to see another Trick Room setter that Indeedee could redirect for to make that. Oh, and the Drifloon as a secondary Tailwind setter I like as well. So lots of things to like here, but I think the offensive coverage that this team has just is not the strongest to complement what is a very, very strong game plan.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I got onto some other teams a little bit for having like one big main mode that people are gonna prep hard against, and I think that's still true of this team as well. But I don't think it's as big of a problem as it was for the other ones, except for maybe that defensive Steel type that you're bringing up. Maybe you're gonna have to tear ground that Zacian here too. So. I think, but with the way that this top the team comp is built, I think it's a little bit more flexible than something like super dedicated rain mode. I like the combination here of the Psy Spam and then like basically the strongest thing you could possibly use to hit dark types. That's strong. It doesn't seem like this team is overly reliant on that top mode because there is some good value here coming out of the low tiers. But I also, since a lot of these are C tiers, I also wonder how well they're going to be able to pick up the slack if the top mode is not doing as well in a particular game or is having trouble handling the opponent's prep. I think the team has sufficient support, but would probably benefit from some more diversity and speed control, a little bit more flexibility in Tailwind. I do like the Yanmega and the Drifloon. Those are two things that if you get them set up in a specific way because of their abilities, they're going to have really fast Tailwinds. But I would maybe like to see something that can just boom, hit the field next to any partner and just go Tailwind really fast, but that's also kind of a big ask when you've got this top-heavy team composition here. I kind of like I can't really tell if this is supposed to be like a Trick Room mode or just some anti-Trick Room tools, because I'm not confident that like Camerupt is going to be a consistent sweeper or Chestnut for that matter. So either way, I don't think it's a huge problem. I think whichever way you want to go, just countering Trick Room or using your own mode, I think it can work. But I just got to go back to this top mode. I love the combination of Zacian and Psy Spam, and I do like the Drifloon as well. It's a really cool baby pick with it basically does almost everything that Drift Blim does. Surprisingly bulky if you build it right. And sometimes you might want it to go down quicker than Drift Blim otherwise would, so you can get something else on the field while Tailwind is still up. So, strong team, looks fun. Looking forward to seeing how it's played. Any final thoughts, Dan?
No, I think that basically sums it up. I like a lot of the value picks. I like the modes. I just wish it had a bit more answers to a common defensive typing, and maybe slightly better speed control, even though I think it's fine that way for now.
Yep. All right, moving on to number 8. Intrusive Nasty Plots. Did you start the last one, or do you want me to take this one?
You can go ahead on this one.
Okay, I like this team. This team has a lot of really interesting pieces, really fun looking pieces, especially in combination with each other. It looks like a team that's really set up for bulky offense that's going to be hard to break through, which sort of makes it a little bit less of a big deal that your speed control here is only coming from like a few pieces. I think that is a little bit of an issue, but it's not a huge problem. I definitely, just like the other Moltres team, I would like to see another Tailwind user aside from Moltres, but that's not as big of a problem here as it was with the last team. I guess Skiploom might have Tailwind, but it's a little bit awkward with... Yeah, okay, so that's something. And it's a redirector too, so that's something. But yeah, the bulky offense on this team, it looks really fun. I think Meowstic has a really strong place on this team. There's a lot of different kinds of support that it offers that this team is really going to appreciate. Thunderwave, screens, fake tears. It's got a few more things in its toolkit. Fake out, sure, why not? Let's see. The only one of my gripes here is that there's some kind of like weird / incomplete type cores. Not as big of a problem in the Terra generation, but usually is better if you can swing that type core. Let's see, if we're looking for like Fire, Water, Grass, we've got Arcanine, Crawdont, and then for Grass, Electrode, Skiploom. It's kind of an awkward combination of things that don't necessarily work all in the same modes every time. I think, let's see, ideally, the Trick Room mode here would have Follow Me and maybe a slower sweeper, although base 50 is really not too bad in Generation 9. But Follow Me would be nice. I usually like to see Follow Me here on teams that have Rage Powder just to stop the opponents from sticking Terra Grass or Goggles on something. But overall, I mean, I think especially the top combination of this team, the top 4, really look strong and fun. It's just bulky offense, lots of disruption, and it's going to be hard to break through. What do you think, Dan?
The best Pokemon on this team, I mean, Iron Hands is one of the best Pokemon in Draft when there aren't restricted. So it is obviously going to be something that the opponents are going to be prepping against each week, so it might not be as effective as it could be otherwise. Glimmora is going to be the MVP of this team. Glimmora is so good in Draft. We had it 2 seasons ago and just sort of went crazy with it for the entire season. So I think that it is going to really overperform this season. I think it'll outperform the Moltres in that special attacker role on this team. The Meowstic setting the screens is going to be really good for a bunch of what this team wants to do. Does Meowstic get Trick Room?
I believe so.
I don't think so. Oh, does it?
I think so.
And Calyrex also does, but like I would love this team if it had something that wanted to set Trick Room more consistently for that Iron Hands just as a secondary option of speed control. And then if there was a more consistent Tailwind, like Moltres is fine, it'll get it up because it's not going to die, but you're not going to be able to take full advantage of the 4 turns because it will be going second or third most of the time in the turn order. So the speed control is really the only gripe I have with this team. I know the Meow does a pretty good job with Thunderwave in helping where the Tailwind isn't as great with the Moltres. But overall, I just think offensively, this team is very threatening. It has my favorite draft pieces. And with some screens like a Light Clay Meowstic, this team is going to just be very annoying to try to kill week in and week out. So I think they put it together and did a very solid job with it. This is a type of team like I could have drafted it. It fits my playstyle very well, so I probably am a bit higher on it than you are.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Glamora, I didn't even mention Glamora, but yeah, that's gonna, in addition to being a strong special attacker, that's also gonna contribute to the bulky nature of this team. If you can kind of, it's funny they've got the Dondozo as their logo here, because if you can do some of that poison spreading and just using the bulk of your team like some of those Dondozo comps do in VGC, I can also see that working here with this team. Those top 3 bulky mons plus some screens from Meowstic, that could be cool too. I also really like the Calyrex here as a more dedicated Trick Room setter. Not because I think it's an amazing Pokemon, but because it's like kind of obscure and nobody ever picks it. So I'm happy to see it getting used, and it does appear to have a pretty well-defined role here because it's the only other Trick Room setter aside from Meowstic, and usually you're not going to want to use your Meowstic for a Trick Room setting. Also want to give one little shout out to Electrode here. That helps with the speed control a lot. I think Electrode is kind of underrated, especially now because in Generation 9 it got access to Electro Web, and a base 150 speed Electro Web is kind of nuts. And the grass typing on Electrode also helps with it offensively. So I think Hisuian Electrode is strong for C tier. It's a good piece, and it'll help this team to be a little bit more fast and offensive sometimes instead of just bulking it out. All right, so that's all I got. Any final thoughts on number 8?
Nope, that sounds good to me.
Okay, number 7, Anti-Psy-Spam Council. This one, our roles are going to be a little bit reversed here because I like this team a little bit better than you do. But why don't you start us off here, Dan?
Yeah, so first of all, they lived up to their name. They have Tinglu, the anti-spam team. I respect it. This is a hard Trick Room team. The average speed on this team is 48. The only thing it has above base 55 is Mew at 100. So this team wants to set up Trick Room, and then it wants to beat you with Trick Room up. Personally, I find hard Trick Room teams less good in MBC than in other drafts, because an MBC match almost never ends within one Trick Room. These matches consistently go to timer, so I like to have a Trick Room mode where you can, get a Trick Room, you can get a speed advantage for 5 turns with Trick Room, but your team is not reliant on it the way that this team is reliant on it. I'm worried with this team that the big throughput in Trick Room looks like Iron Hands, and then otherwise the damage output might not be enough to justify needing to set Trick Room 2 or 3 times a game to try to win with it, and I'm not sure how consistently it can double or triple up with the Trick Room. So I see what it's trying to do, I like the game plan, but I'm worried that this might not be the league where that game plan pans out consistently.
That's fair. Trick Room is drafting hard Trick Room is weird because it kind of suffers from some of the same sort of problem I've been mentioning, where you have one mode, your opponents are going to prep hard for it, so maybe it's harder to use week to week. I don't see that as being as much of a problem here. I think it's fair that they're gonna have trouble getting Trick Room up multiple times in a game, even though that's often what they're gonna want to do. But I also have some faith in this team to function without Trick Room even being up, just through bulky offense or maybe even stall. I think using maybe a Trick Room mode to blow holes in your opponent's team in the early game and finishing off with like some stally Ting Lu bullshit might actually work. You got stuff like Iron Hands, Mew, Diancie that's going to be hard to take down outside of Trick Room anyway. Ronzong too, Diancie especially if you Terra it, because it's defensive typing is pretty terrible. It's going to want to use a Terra pretty frequently, I think. I think the Psychic Dark Fighting core here, very, very strong, although a little bit repetitive. I don't know if you need 3 different Psychic types here, or I guess, there's only one real fighting type here. Scraggy doesn't count. But yeah, a little bit repetitive on the psychic types. But I do like those pieces here. I also think that in that core, Fairy sort of kind of plays the role of psychic sometimes, so that's a little bit redundant as well. I don't think you need all of those pieces. I would have loved to see, even with a hard Trick Room mode, I would have loved to see just a fast option, as well as some kind of redirection to make the Trick Room setup easier, and to make a setup Mew a little bit more viable. I suspect on this team, maybe support Mew might be more common if they're going for that bulkier stall kind of game plan. But I think with a redirector on the team, setup Mew could be pretty strong. Not as strong as it was in Max. I have a little bit of a bias there, playing so frequently with like Swords Dancer, Nasty Plot Mew going into a Dynamax, but still could be good here, I think. I also just one last point. One of the main reasons that I wanted to place this team so high is because a lot of teams seem to have are not necessarily soft to Trick Room, but have weaknesses against certain kinds of Trick Room comps. And I think with the variety of different Trick Room related assets that this team has access to, they're going to be able to exploit a lot of those weaknesses. So in a sea of teams that have some of those shortcomings, you've got a team here that's going to be able to exploit those shortcomings fairly frequently with competent prep and play. Any final thoughts, Dan?
Yeah, that just about wraps it up for me. I just wish this team had like one Pokemon that was, base like 115 speed and had Tailwind.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then you could threaten like a Tailwind Iron Hands or Tailwind DNC, and it's just would make it so much harder to prep for.
Yep, definitely. Okay, moving on to number 6, the Nebby Backpackers. Dan, I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to start or should I?
I'm curious to hear what you have to say. Go ahead.
Okay, so first thing I want to note is that I think this is very well balanced for a U-tier comp. I like the, and that's partially due to the point distribution and partially due to the value that you guys got out of the lower tiers, and even some value in the higher tiers. I mean, Tyranitar's value for sure. That was one of 2 Pokemon that were on the fence at the end of the voting, and I decided to break the tie in favor of A tier for Tyranitar just because nobody's been drafting it. So definitely good value there. Lots of value, lots of dangerous combinations. This is something we talked about briefly before the recording. There's no there's no real dedicated Trick Room mode, but there's slow-ish stuff that like Tyranitar and Necrozma that's going to be strong under Trick Room as long as you're not facing down like the Trick Room specific Pokemon that other comps have, like that Iron Hands that we just saw a little while ago, for example. But there's still also enough anti-Trick Room stuff that I'm satisfied. I don't see Trick Room here as being a problem, even against opposing Trick Room modes. Maybe even Clodsire can help since it's so slow. I'm less familiar with its move pool, but it might be able to disrupt an opposing Trick Room mode somehow. Fungus can certainly do that. Base 15 Spore. That's pretty strong. That's definitely hey, don't fuck with me with your Trick Room mode kind of Pokemon. I think there's great support for Necrozma here. Screamtail Necrozma, I love a lot. Screamtail, even though I don't think it belongs in S tier, I do think it's a high value A tier, especially if you can play it well, and I know it's something that you have experience with, so I'm confident that that's going to be a very dangerous Pokemon for a lot of teams to go up against, especially next to the Necrozma. I do think that the nature of this team's sort of Necrozma's not the only thing, not the only place where your damage is coming from, that's for sure. But I do think that a lot of this team was built, obviously the team was built with Necrozma in mind, and some of the team is definitely dedicated to this sort of like protect the king strategy, which has its own built-in shortcomings. If something happens to the king, then the support pieces don't really have much else to do. You know, if you're trying to do some Necrozma stuff with Fungus and Screamtail next to it, and the Necrozma goes down, you're kind of screwed. So that is a built-in weakness here. I also think that the team is a little bit definitely soft to intimidate. You've got that Oblivious on Mamoswine that helps, and you could put Clear Amulet on something else. But that is going to sort of force your prep a little bit. I wonder if maybe we might see like a cheeky special Necrozma come out one week, or maybe two, just to avoid that kind of thing. It's got a usable special attack stat, so it would be fun. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's all my notes. So, what do you think, Dan? How wrong am I?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Biggest weakness for this team is the lack of special damage. Although, besides Kill and Watch Roll, Necrozma and Tyranitar both have very usable special attacks with really good coverage. By the end of the season, Screamtail will be an S tier moving forward in MBC, just as a heads up. It's going to be a Palafin situation again, where it's just like, yep, that's correct. The Clodsire, it does have really good disruptive moves. I don't know what kind of Trick Room attacker wants to get through Haze, Yawn, Toxic, Recover.
Yep, there we go.
That's so that's sort of the anti-Trick Room mode, along with the Fungus too. And I don't know, this team is very fun. I've got a few game plans with it that we've been cooking up that will be a lot of fun when we bring them out, that involve every Pokemon on the team, not just the ones that we've and you know, it's weird, like there's a steel type restricted kilowatt based discharge mode in Ambi, and I feel like I've seen that somewhere before, where a team like copied teams work just slightly differently. But I do like Kilowatt Roll as a tailwind setter in this generation, something that I often make a priority, because it can set tailwind while also being fast enough to just be part of a discharge mode. And I don't know, I think this team is really good, and we were shocked that Duskmane fell to us. We were convinced that that was far and away the best Pokemon in the format since it didn't. And I'm very happy with the way that we were able to build around it.
I think it's so interesting the way that people have been perceiving these different U-tier picks, because that Necrozma Duskmane being the top Pokemon on the list would not have occurred to me at all. And I think probably most people in the league would have said the same, since you guys were the only ones who thought to pick it. I think the dogs, Sword Shield dogs, are probably at the top of people's list. Obviously, both the Zacians got taken. I actually thought Zamazenta would be more popular than Zacian, but that's all right. And then we had, like Dialga and Giratina getting picked, which I didn't really expect at all. I figured if Dialga was going to get picked, it would have been on Alyssa's team, but then she went with Giratina, so that was funny. I'm definitely surprised. Aside from the Zacian, I'm surprised at which U tiers were prioritized here. So I'm very interested to see how you guys do with the Duskmane. I hope that you're able to prove the league wrong, that maybe this is actually one of the best U tiers. So it'll be fun to see. Any other thoughts before moving on to number 5?
Nope. I'm gonna stop before I spoil anything.
All right, number 5. The Rural Jurors, another team that has won this league before. Looks like a very strong team comp from my end. Dan, what do you think?
So Indeedee and Sneasler is really good offensive. And this team does have the Driftblim for the size band, which is great. And does Jirachi get expanding Force?
Yes.
So it's not the strongest secondary size spam user, but it's decently strong in the role. I like Clefable as a redirector. Charles and I have this debate all the time on Boston is a good Pokemon or not. I think it's a really good Pokemon. Charles thinks really bad Pokemon, but I like the value for it on this team. Overall, this is a team that just has a lot of good stuff that makes sense together, and even though it's never going to set Trick Room for itself, the Foongus means that it's not going to be too weak to opposing Trick Room, and I guess the Belly Bolt as well. So, I mean, I just think it's a solid team with a varied damage output that also has support pieces that can work well together, and that's basically all you can ask for. It just is a bunch of good pieces that make sense together.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's a whole lot to say about it, just because it's so it's really strong and solid, and it's kind of like this feels getting to this point in the power rankings feels a little bit like grading a good essay versus a bad essay. If you're grading a bad essay, you mark it up all over the place, and this is wrong and that's wrong. And a good essay, you're just like, yeah, you did everything right, and it's quick and easy. That's kind of what this feels like. Really strong Psychic Dark fighting core here. That stupid Dark Dog is even if you don't like it, Charles, it's good in C tier. I think it's good value. Intimidate with some good stats and your own built-in Intimidate counter if you want it. Sneasler, I fucking love on this draft. Super versatile, great next to Indeedee with the Unburden stuff, and it's so, like, most Unburden users like Driftblim, you're really forced to use them as that Unburden user, and you're not with Sneasler at all. You can easily slap a Focus Sash or a Life Orb or something on it and just go jolly base 120. It's a strong Pokemon to just plop it on the field with the stats that it has and go fast, do damage. Jirachi, I'm very curious and interested to see what they're going to do with Jirachi. I wish Jirachi had more setup options, because that would make it a lot better next to Clefable, but they still have strong type synergy with each other. Driftblim is very strong, obviously, for, we've already talked about Drifloon. It's basically the same stuff. Yeah, I guess it could. I think the bottom picks do a decent job of filling out a few extra types and patching up the Trick Room weaknesses. There could be more of a Trick Room mode here. Sometimes, depending on the Trick Room matchup and the prep of the opponent, Foongus may or may not be enough to counter an opposing Trick Room mode. Like if Foongus is kind of all you have, and your opponent has a big Trick Room sweeper that just goes Terra Grass, well, you might be in trouble. So that might be a little bit of a weakness there. So something to think about, maybe with some transactions. But you do have a few other slow pieces here that could help out a bit. Overall, just really strong team, especially the type core combos up top, really great. All right, number 4. The Omaha Cinnabons. Again, not surprising to see another former champion here drafting a top-ranked team. Dan, do you want to start us off here?
Yeah, sure. This team's got Fluttermane and Chi-Yu. No, okay. So
and moving on.
Yeah, so obviously Fluttermane Chi-Yu is a very strong, threatening, fast offensive mode. Iron Thorns is really cheap. I mean, I know we all meme on that Pokemon, but for 15 points you get 570 stats, including 134 attack.
That's insane.
Got access to Dragon Dance.
Insane.
Like, it's really good. That's probably a mistake. We should fix that next time.
Probably.
I know we just voted it down, but I think that was a mistake, and I'm pretty confident in that now that I'm looking at it on paper. Gyarados works well with the Chi-Yu Fluttermane mode, and there's a lot of other very strong things. I like that the Vulpix gives it like a sneaky Sun option with the Shiftry, the Chi-Yu, and the Fluttermane all taking advantage of it. It's a very good use of 10 points there. Trick Room concerns me for this team. I know it's got Slowking. I know Tinkaton can be bulky enough to like annoy Trick Room modes, but it concerns me because there are so many Pokemon that are very, very frail on this team. The throughput on this team, though, is off the charts. I mean, obviously, there are a few things that you get worried about when you run a team like this, and that's, a bulky Pokemon that can stand up to the Flutter Mane and Chi-Yu. Because when that happens, it's a lot harder to extract the maximum value out of it. And also, you worry about, I think, Trick Room that survives that onslaught, and then priority moves. But that's sort of nitpicking, because this team is very well designed with what it wants to do. It's got a few sneaky modes that you don't necessarily think about, and its main 2-Pokemon mode is probably one of the most oppressive 2-Pokemon modes.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about not just Fluttermane Chi-Yu as a pair, but Fluttermane Chi-Yu Gyarados as one of these like really strong Regulation C team comps. I think the Gyarados does a lot of work with these two Pokemon, especially the type synergy with the Chi-Yu, the Intimidate to shore up the shitty physical defense stat on the Fluttermane, and it's also a Steel resist. I'm kind of viewing that trio as one big core. I am a little bit disappointed that the Grass type to go with the Chi-Yu and Gyarados is a little bit lackluster. You sort of have to use that cheeky Sun mode to get everything you want out of Shiftry, which is awkward having to use Vulpix. I like Vulpix as an option here sometimes, but having to use that to activate your like mediocre C-tier Grass type kind of feels bad. Also feels a little bit bad to have Slowking as really the only Trick Room piece here. I do agree that this seems fairly soft to Trick Room. You do have Solosis down there, which is base 20. That's an interesting Pokemon, I guess, if you want to try to do something with that. Probably not, though. Let's see, pure support pieces seem to be lacking, but I really don't think that's terribly... I don't think that's necessary with the way this team is constructed, especially those top three working together. They're going to have a real nice time functioning together in a kind of a balanced offense core, even without dedicated support pieces, especially because Gyarados can function in part as a support piece, depending on how you build it. Maybe it's a pure support piece some weeks. Taunt, Intimidate, Thunder Wave, all good stuff. But yeah, that's about all I've got. Just an incredibly strong, flexible core at the top that doesn't rely on any kind of field effect or anything. You can just plop those three Pokemon down and they'll go to work. Iron Thorn's incredible value. I agree, probably a mistake. I don't think it's an accident that two of the top-ranked teams here both drafted Iron Thorns. We're going to see a lot of good stuff from Iron Thorns this season, I think, between those two teams. And I think the Tinkaton offers some extra support, some types, nice types that we don't see elsewhere on the team. Slitherwing is interesting, helps with that cheeky Sun mode to go with the Shiftry, the Chi-Yu, the Fluttermane. I'm kind of thinking, as I'm going through this more, Vulpix may be more valuable here than I think. It's activating a lot of different Pokemon here, even though it's not great itself. But yeah, that's about all I got. Any final thoughts, Dan?
No, I really like this team, and I think it's in consideration for the one spot. I think any of the teams that you have number 2 through 6 could be considered the strongest team in this league.
Yeah. There's a lot of strength up top here. Okay, moving on to number 3, the Poké-Unks. Dan, why don't you start us off here?
So it's Urshifu and Rain. Again, very obvious mode that is very strong and well supported with a Raichu. On top of that, I feel like you like Dragapult a lot more than me. In Gen 9, Dragapult has been a bit underwhelming for me, but it's still obviously like the fastest thing in the format. It has a lot of options on both the physical and special side and support-wise, but I've just found it underwhelming compared to how oppressive it was in Gen 8. But overall, I mean, it's a balanced team. It's got a fast mode with Tailwind. You can also set Trick Room with it. It's a lot like our team in that there's no dedicated Trick Room attacker, and it's probably a bit soft to Trick Room overall. But the difference between this and the other Rain team is a two for a Rain mode, that if you over prep for it, and you just decide to bring a bunch of things that beat Urshifu and Pelipper, you struggle a bit more to some of the other modes that this thing has. Like, they switch in a Raichu with Lightning Rod and your electric moves are suddenly not as good, or if you're a grass type, the Pelipper can just sort of hurricane you. So, I mean, this is another team that reminds me of this team. It's a team of good Pokemon that makes sense together. This team's probably a bit too soft to Trick Room for my tastes, but otherwise, it's going to be fast and it's going to hit really hard, and it's tough to do something that's too much better than that.
Yeah, I think that all makes a lot of sense. This Rain mode up top is definitely much better than the other one that we saw with the tons and tons of points dedicated to that Rain mode with the Archaludon and the Tornadus and all that. This is much more like leaves your points for other things, so that, yeah, like you said, if somebody over preps for Rain, you've got other stuff to deal with that team. Balance here is really the name of the game. Balance and versatility. And versatility is a huge part of why this team is ranked so high. When you have a team that is more balanced and more flexible, more versatile, it definitely increases the skill ceiling. It means that if you are spending a lot more time and effort on prep, this kind of team is going to give you a lot more, because you're spending the time to figure out exactly what pieces of these Pokemon and combinations you have to beat your opponents, and it gives you so many different pieces and combinations to have a more balanced, flexible team like this, as opposed to something more top heavy. I have a couple of gripes with this team, some of which you've already gone over. There's certainly a questionable Trick Room matchup. You covered that pretty well. I don't think I need to go deeper into that. I wish the speed control options were a little bit faster and more numerous. You've got Tailwind here, but it's just Pelipper, right? Base 65 is not great, even though you do often want to put a Focus Sash on that thing anyway, but there's a couple other things you might want to put a Focus Sash on here. Urshifu, maybe Dragapult, Raichu. So sometimes you might want like a Damp Rock or a Scarf on Pelipper or something. You do have some speed control options from Raichu. Thunder Wave and Electro Web at base 110 is pretty good, not ideal. Ideally, I'd like to see something faster than Raichu with Tailwind. I think because some of your speed control is not super fast, you might have to resort to like a Thunder Wave Dragapult or something like that, which is nice to have. Dragapult's very versatile. It's got that, it's capable of offense. You've got redirection here. You could maybe set up a Dragon Dance with it, but it's also got some support options. You can cause some status, maybe set up screens, stuff like that. So the problems with this team, they're not like glaring weaknesses, but they are definitely some shortcomings. But overall, just very well balanced, great type diversity, lots of strong combinations, a lot of options with this team. Very high skill ceiling. If these guys put time and effort into their prep, they're going to be very successful with this team, I think. Anything else on this one?
Nope. I'm, in retrospect, probably a bit lower than this on this team, but overall, like, it's still definitely in the top half of the league. It's a very solid team. Maybe it's not a top 5 team, though.
Okay, fair enough. All right, moving on to number 2. We have the Devin Powers Fan Club. I love this team a lot. Dan, why don't you start us off here, and then I'll start us off on number 1.
Yeah, this team is so good. One, it's got the Fire, Water, Grass core in the first 2 picks, and then the Iron Thorns. Thunderous Incarnate is a really good support option that has some flexible offensive modes as well. Iron Treads, I think, is another one of those underrated glue pieces that fits really well on a lot of teams, and combined with Thunderous, it actually gives you a pretty powerful Disquake mode. The speed control here is a little questionable, but between Thunderwave with Thunderous and Tailwind on Latios, the fast mode, you're probably fine. The slow mode, that's going to be the big weakness for this team, is getting taken advantage of in Trick Room. Maybe that Poliwrath could have been something else to clean up that matchup a bit more. But overall, I love the offensive throughput that this team has. I love setup capabilities. I love the modes, and I just really like the value they got at each slot. Every Pokemon feels like it was pushing towards the top of its tier in value as opposed to the bottom of its tier in value.
Yeah, very true. I felt like this team was just it's very well rounded, very versatile. Obviously a strength of our number 3 ranked team as well, but I think this team does it even better. Excellent type diversity here. There's just like solid Pokemon versatility and type synergy that seem to be the main point of the team, with some of these more some modes that rely more on field effects being kind of secondary, which I think is very nice. That's very strong, again, compared to some of those dedicated top modes that rely on those field effects. Like at the top, you've just got that Fire, Water, Grass core, like you said, and the Thunderous, adding some really important types there and some really strong support. That's just really flexible and versatile, and there's not like a clear, I gotta stop this field effect to stop that mode, but you still have some of those field effects there. You've got Thunderous with Prankster Rain for the Poliwrath. That's kind of cool as a low tier option. You've got Prankster Electric Terrain with the Quark Drive on Iron Thorns and Iron Treads. That's really cool. You have the terrain combo with your grass types. Throw a Grassy Glide on the Ogerpon Hearthflame. That's really strong, something we've seen in VGC anyway, especially with that +1 attack on the Terra. It's just, I'm seeing so much cool shit here. My only real major complaint, similar to our number 3 ranked team, team looks kind of soft. Trick Room. It could maybe use some more setup options, like stat boosting, just to kind of force prep and maybe make the redirection on Ogerpon a little bit more useful. You do have like the Shell Smash on the Poltegeist, but I'm not seeing a lot of other stuff that's reliant on stat boosts here. Dragon Dance Iron Thorns is definitely there, so you have some options, but might like to see a little bit more. But still, not a big deal. Overall, this team is extremely strong, very versatile, got some really strong modes. I'm so excited to see how this team plays. Any final thoughts before we move on to our last one?
Yeah, this team will be fun, so I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Definitely. Okay, number 1. We have the Sneeds of Ruin. I really love this team. This team just looks so strong to me. It checks so many of the boxes that I'm looking for when I'm evaluating a draft league team. Just like our last couple of teams, this one is extremely well balanced. There are no wasted points on this team in my estimation. None. It is really not overly reliant on any one mode. There are major tools like Follow Me and lots of diversity of speed control and including Priority Tailwind that I really like to see. So like those really strong tools like that are present. Lots of different support like that speed control and redirection I mentioned, in addition to a lot of different kinds of damage mitigation, whether that's Screens from Dragapult or Intimidate from Hitmontop or Aurora Veil from Ninetales. It's got a lot of those options for speed and offense, but also bulky offense. It's maybe, to me, this is maybe the most versatile team in the bunch. Really allows Pokemon like Dragapult and Ninetales to play differently week to week. You don't always have to pigeonhole them into one role or another. You could have a more offensive Blizzard spam, or you could have a more supportive like Icy Wind, Aurora Veil kind of set. Dragapult, just the same, is going to be capable of running both offensive and supportive sets, depending on the week. I think maybe you could use a bit of a better Trick Room setter instead of Malamar, but it's also not as big of a deal since you have Follow Me on the team. That's kind of maybe my only complaint here. A lot of this just looks really solid, really well-rounded, really strong. I know that, Dan, I know you're not quite as high on this team as I am, so tell me why I'm wrong. What am I overlooking here?
So if we were playing Gen 8, this would be the best team. Definitely. But we are playing Gen 9, where, although I can appreciate the type cores, I probably value them a bit less than you do. I do like the depth on this team, but I'm worried about the immediacy of offense and just how bulky some of these other teams that they're going to have to try to chew through. Mamoswine and Copperajah are fine. They can do a lot of damage. But outside of them and Chi-Yu, this team doesn't really have sort of the punch that it needs to break through some of the bulkier teams, I don't think. Now, don't get me wrong, I think flexibility is very important. I think that the good support options are very important. I think Appleton is criminally underrated all the time in terms of the ability to just close the game. But I'm just worried about the throughput on this team compared to the other, and the centralization of damage, especially from sources that need speed control, which means the Fletchinder needs to be coming more consistently, and Fletchinder I'm not a huge fan of most of the time. And then the Trick Room mode, like, if Trick Room is brought, yes, Copperajah can counter Trick Room and Appleton by itself, but I feel like in prep with this team, that's going to be the part that ends up on the cutting room floor more often than anything else, which means on a weekly basis they have to choose between leaving Trick Room behind and being incredibly soft to it, or leaving some of the key pieces that provide their flexibility behind. So as a 10 team, I think this is very good, but when you are bringing it down to 6 for a given week, I have a few more questions about it, especially that damage throughput. Now, that's not to say this isn't one of the 5 best teams in the league, because it probably is, but I have a few more question marks about it than I think you do. Especially, like I said, I tend to think you rate Dragapult as if we are still in Gen 8, whereas in Gen 9, I think it has been one of the more disappointing Pokemon in draft.
Yeah, fair enough. I can see how that might be a problem, feeling like you need all 10 pieces week to week. To me, I look at this team as very similar to 2 and 3 in that if you spend a lot of time prepping, the team is going to be a lot more rewarding. I do wonder how that's going to interact with the sense that you do need all these different pieces week to week. So will be interesting to see how that plays out. Any other final thoughts on this one, Dan?
Nope. Looking forward to seeing the season. For everyone who thinks Matt made a mistake, let him know in the comment section down below. Like, light him up.
Oh, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of chatter about mistakes that I've made here. So, feel free to rip me a new one. I'm not perfect. If you think I did something wrong, fucking tell me about it. We'll talk about it. It'll be great. Yeah, good luck to everybody this season. Really excited about the 9th season of the Multi-Battle Conference. This is probably going to be our last one on Scarlet Violet. I believe we've already had one game played, so we're just looking for the rest to be played out through the week. There will be probably some more league-related content as we go throughout the season. Not going to be like big weekly streams like we used to have back in seasons 4 and 5, but there will be some sporadic bits of content, perhaps with a variety of other guests who are also playing in our league here. So So stay tuned for that. I'm looking forward to making some other content throughout the next few months. So stay tuned. All right, thank you again, Dan, for joining me here. Was really nice to have your perspective here to help me get out of my Generation 8 brain. And good luck to you and the rest of the Nebby Backpackers as well throughout the season.
Thank you very much, Matt.
All right, I'll see you guys later.